Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Mohan Krishna Sonti comes back to us and help us read between the numbers. Yes, it's a turn of phrase. What I'm suggesting is that that is Mohan Krishna ji and I, we are going to be looking at the numbers. Of course, he has done the crunching and he has done his interpretation. This is a response to some of the comments that we got from the previous hangout that PGurus had with Mohan Krishna Sonti ji, and Mohan ji was very kind to go back and look at the questions, come up with a reasonable slide deck, and it took a while, but we thought it's important. We have a few years before the next Lok Sabha elections are going to come. We have to first get it right. That's what we've done. This gives you more insights. Perhaps you will also be surprised at some of the data that jumps out at you. So let's now welcome Mohan Krishna Sonti ji. Mohan ji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel. How are you, sir?
Namaste, Sree ji. It's very happy to be here again. So I saw the first session, there are a lot of comments and well-intended comments. So I went over them and I thought some of the things I need to clarify a little more, particularly related to the alliances, as well as there were some questions on the flow when I quickly went through the slide and said there are 5 steps to the election process to forming the government. Thought I'll elaborate a little bit more on that. Some people had questions on that too. And in addition to that, I just want to go over a little more detail on 4 states. One is Maharashtra. The elections are coming up. Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and West Bengal. So I'm not doing a full analysis. It's basically a very crisp idea on what the state looks like so that you get some basic idea. So it is not all the numbers, and we're not going to make any full-fledged predictions or what happened in the past, but some idea on how the state looks like and what this is about. All right. The last slide is going to be about, the last segment is going to be about the demographics. How do we read the demographic change? There are quite a few factors for the demographic change, and we have to understand how do we look at those numbers and how to crunch those numbers and see what it means so that we make a reasonable argument, because people will come across in different groups that the arguments on people throwing in different kinds of numbers. But this is how you look at the numbers and read the numbers, and you can sharpen your idea on this is how the demographics change. And then we'll have a few, the very last slide is going to be about different aspects of it on different questions, the attacks that come in, the key points, the arguments that are happening in the internet. We're going to address those. So can I have the slide deck, please? So to start with, so this is going to be the BJP election analysis. It is basically what has happened in different states and all the details. Like I just mentioned, it's understanding election alliances is the first one. It's about summation of votes, optimizing seats with percentage that we talked about in previous session, and how many optimizations have happened. And unless the game is, if BJP has to catch up on that game, it is not about whether Congress did it or they gave it to a third party to do the job. But end of the day, they did the result of that is that they have a good optimization. So it's if BJP has to catch up on that. Otherwise, it's like using calculator in the era of computers. So 5 steps to the forming government. We're going to go into the details of that. Then we'll go a little bit of the state analysis for Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal. Obviously, in one session, a small segment of it, I cover 4 states. We're not going to go into an entire details, but at least get some basic understanding of how these states look like. Then we'll do the demographic change, the narratives, and the propaganda. The sources that I've used is the election, all the numbers that I have, except for the typos, and obviously a couple of numbers here and there can go wrong because there are so many numbers. But I took very good care to make sure all the numbers are cross-checked. I got the data from Election Commission, which is Government of India, Census data, Government of India, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, Ministry of Statistics, Program Implementation, Government of India, United Nations Economic and Social Affairs. And these are cross-checked with several other sources as well. So I'm pretty confident about all these numbers. Any other numbers that we see must be coming outside the government data or the United Nations. So I don't know about other numbers, but these are, I would say, the most authentic data that we can get on whatever the government is actually presenting it. And of course, there are a few other sources too. These are some of the primary sources. There are obviously a few other sources. Like the things presented in Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, the parliament, and many of those numbers were also taken. But all of them are considered absolutely authentic. When they're spoken in the parliament, they are as authentic, right? And given by the Government of India or any government sources, now United Nations, we should take that is well-vetted source. All right, then let's start with this. The summation of votes and optimizing seats and percent. Now, these are generally 4 rules that people had to understand when it comes to alliances, right? And how the summation of votes happen. So as a general statistical rule, forming alliances have very, very low attrition and a high fidelity for the party. Meaning the people who are basically aligned with a certain party will go with that party. A substantial number will. The attrition rate is very, very small. So there are a lot of arguments on whether if an alliance is formed, some people don't like the alliance and therefore they left the party. That such fractions are very, very small. In fact, we can see the numbers from practically every corner of it. For example, let's say the Bihar Assembly. You see that in Bihar, JDU was an alliance. The ones that are in orange here, they're all the alliance with the NDA. This green is alliance with the other opposition party, which is currently the Indie side, let's just say, which includes Congress and everybody else, right? So irrespective of, see, when this alliance was formed with Congress, you see the fidelity. The people have shifted from JDU to BJP. Once the split is done, then they are highly fiddled. Whether they come back to it, go out of it, it doesn't matter. People stick to the group. You will see that in whether the national Lok Sabha percentage, right? You look at any of these areas, so RJD, Congress, irrespective of the alliances, they always have a very high fidelity. If they didn't have that fidelity, the alliances would not make any sense. And alliances happen all the time. So people say that in alliances, the 2 + 2 is not 4, it can be 5. All that is basically an emotional talk. So don't go by it. Alliances have a value and they are always formed because people do have an extremely high fidelity to the party and they have a very low attrition rate. There is always a small floating population. Anytime a new alliance, now the breaking alliances, anytime the alliances are broken, a new fidelity will be formed, but the core remains. Again, the example here, we see that the JDU and BJP were together for a very, very long time, and then the split happened. When the split happens, a new alliances, a new fidelity is formed. And once the new fidelity is formed, they stick with it. Meaning the next time, even if the alliance is formed, they did not switch to JDU. They will continue where they are. Now, some people have shifted from RJD, will go back to RJD and things like that, but the fidelity is not going to change that fast, the alliances. So when you form an alliance, the care should be taken that when you break it, new fidelities are always formed, right? So when these new fidelities are formed in breaking alliances, again, they are very, very faithful. It's a high fidelity. Think of it as after 1,000 years of invasions, people, they form an alliance with the parties because they are like little kings. They're little kings of their kingdom. It's a virtual kingdom. It's not a physical boundary, but that party is like a kingdom and they're very faithful to it. Irrespective of what they do, the attrition is very, very slow. People don't necessarily leave the kingdom and go away. All right. So you can see that people in their own parties can actually make dramatic mistakes. They might lose the battle. Any number of things can happen, but the fidelity remains. You can see that in Congress. In the previous show, I just showed how for the last 25 years, the Congress retained, like you can see here, it kind of retained the 20%. The little dip that you see here in 2014 is when the Andhra Pradesh was split, which was giving the largest chunk of votes to Congress. Once that is split, YSRCP is formed. Again, that is breaking alliances in some sense because you're breaking the party. So again, new fidelities are formed. Somebody is going to take that chunk and walk away, right? But the core remains. So this 20% core, no matter what they do, 2014, 2019, they had it in 2024, they're still not winning. It doesn't matter. That fidelity remains. Same goes with every other party. The shifts are going to be very, very minimal. They're going to be very, very minimal anywhere in forming alliances. Breaking alliances, a new kingdom is formed. So a new king is going to take a chunk away. That is how these alliances work. So anyone who says the alliances, the entirely new things are going to be happen, that doesn't happen. You can safely do a mere summation of the votes and take a small chunk of the percentage, maybe like about 5% or so, and because that is the attrition rate. Because that attrition is not necessarily because an alliance is formed. Very, very often that is an attrition where people do shift. But the fidelity is very high. Now the change, anytime a party changes from one party to the other for any reason, the chances are about 60% will go back or find somebody else. There's only a 30% retention. We have seen that last time in the previous program, what happened in Varanasi, in Faisalabad. The shift happened, 60,000 votes in Faisalabad, and then they retained 40,000. They retained 20,000 and 40,000 went out. Same with Varanasi, about 90,000 shift, and Modi ji retained 30,000 of those votes. You will see this general trend. Obviously, this number 30% is not fixed, but you see the general idea that given 25, 30, 40, just about a small chunk of it. So these migrating population of voters will change, but the retention is typically about 30%. These are the very general statistical rules that you will see. You can do the analysis throughout and you will find this. And the scope, this works the same at a national level, state level, constituency like Varanasi, Faizabad. You can go to even the MLA constituencies. It is quite similar, unless the new kings come in. When the new kings come in, they take a whole chunk out. So that is why even if there is a dispute within the party and somebody separates, a big chunk goes out because it's a new king and he's going to take his followers. One example of that, a classic example, is in Karnataka, Yediyurappa, when he split from the BJP, he took about 10 to 15% of that chunk outside. And then when he joined back, he just brought the whole thing back, right? That was a small breakup. If you remember, Yediyurappa formed his own party. So I'm saying these are like, imagine a small kings taking away their, their praja, right? And that fidelity is very high. So now let's look at the national, the vote percentages. You look at this, the color, that orange is basically BJP. The green, I just put it for the Congress. Anytime there's an alliance with the Congress, I put it in green. If there is other third party alliance, it's in blue. And black, they had no alliance. Now, if you look at the trends here, now TDP is probably, as a party, is probably least faithful to any alliances, right? It has formed an alliance with the Congress. It was formed an alliance with a third or fourth front. Then BJP, Congress, I mean, it basically shifted everywhere. AITC also kind of shifted multiple times. But if you look at these alliances, you see all these different colorful things. DMK was in alliance with the Congress party. And then it once momentarily was in partnership with the NDA, then with the Congress, then had a different alliance. All these colorful things, but you see the percentages haven't changed much. That change is gradual because of its own actions. Nothing to do with the alliances. So you look at SP2, it shifted many times. SP is one party that never joined NDA, but yes, they were independent, they were third front or a different alliance, part of the India alliance, all combinations. BSP, it was part of another alliance or independent. TDP was in alliance with practically anybody and everybody. So we have the green, which is India alliance, or the Congress alliance with Congress, with BJP, then with a third party and BJP. It did all combinations, but you see the numbers, they don't change much. You can see all these numbers. So alliances change dramatically is completely meaningless. They do work. That's why alliances are formed. The fidelity is very high. The attrition is very low. Just a quick look here. All these parties, you see a substantial number of parties like RJD, BJD, AIT. So all these have started from 1997, 98, 99. This is when these parties were formed. You didn't have these parties. So when these parties are formed, new parties are formed, you will see that they're going to create a new kingdom. A chunk will go there. And you will see all the dynamics. For example, in Bihar, you can see the JDU, how when the JDU is formed, how things will suddenly change. It was formed in 2003. You see how this whole, where I put a star over here because the JDU is part of, it's basically Nitish Kumarji, who was part of a different party. So that's the reason I put a star here. The party itself was formed in 2003. So after this becomes JDU at some point. All of these parties are split from Congress or Janata Party, right? All right. So we do the analysis based on that. Once you understand these 4 points, breaking alliance, forming alliance.
Before we go to the next slide, I want to look at the rows 2014 and 2019. If you look at the percentage of vote, INC has more or less stayed the same. BJP jumped 6%, and that 6% appears to have come a little bit from SP, a little bit from BSP, a little bit from TDP. I just don't see where that's still 1, 2, 3%. Where else did they gain? Do you have any idea?
Yes. So basically in every one of these chunks, right, we'll go over the details some other time, but for the BJP in general, you will see it's a constant progress. The BJP's victory is not so much about the rhetoric that they put in, or even for the Congress or any other party. Like you have seen some parties give totally very bad statements. They have lost really bad. People were still faithful. For BJP, the growth is based on the civilizational ethos. As and when people start, leaning more and more towards, yes, my culture, my country, I need to be with it. Those are the people that BJP is slowly adding. And that growth is going to be small unless it does it in some chunks over here, is when some of the parties actually disappear and some of the new alliances are formed somewhere else and people defect, right? This 7% jump, it could come from any number of sources, because you see all these numbers put together comes to barely like 60%. There is still 40% chunk that we haven't analyzed. There are so many other parties that completely disappeared, and so many other parties that completely merged with BJP altogether. It's complete merger. So when some of those things happen, they're going to bring in a huge chunk of the votes, right? And so that's where you had a big jump. You had a big jump in 2009 to 14 as well. You will see a lot of parties actually disappeared in 2014. Of course, the new ones were formed and they had a very smaller impact. And some parties completely stopped contesting in some states. Like they used to take away a chunk. Like you could see Samajwadi Party and BSP, and many of them wanted to be the national party. So they would contest in many places. They would take at least some chunk of votes, and they stopped contesting in those places. So there are a lot of shifts over there, but we can see why there was a jump from 18 to 31, 31 to 37. A lot of it, you can see they are again very faithful to the party. This shift, you will see that there are groups who are really pro-Hindu and pro-civilizational ethos. It's just that they are held by a different kingdom and a different king, as in a different party. When that party completely merges, you're getting an entire big chunk. And the whole objective is just like in the ancient times, how do we put these kingdoms together, then have a division. So we'll go with that some other time on why there's a big jump in 2009 to 14 and then 14 to 19. But for Congress party, this dip is because many things happened in 2014. One is the Telangana split, Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, which used to provide the highest number of seats and votes to Congress. And it suddenly dipped from 40% in Andhra Pradesh side, it went to like practically nothing, right? So that lost a substantial chunk. But they did many other such things in few other states where a lot of things were broken. So that's why that's the dip. But Congress otherwise had a faithful 20%, right? Correct. But we see how the breaking alliance changed. So keep this for, these are the very general rules, and you will see these rules being followed in practically every level at national, state, and constituency. All right. So we'll move to the next one. Now, the 5 steps of forming a government. So this I had mentioned very briefly in one line in the previous session. So the number one you see is about identifying the leaders, the political leaders who work with people and for the people. It is very tough to find them, but the whole politics is about finding these special leaders. These are like the little future kings who are going to hold on to their praja, basically their voter base. And like I said, high fidelity, low attrition. So we need good leaders over there who can actually hold on to that. And if we have a very poor leader, the party will perform poorly. Now, political leaders who align with the party's ideas and vision, which means typically we don't do an import. And sometimes BJP has done that, which is a political expediency. We should typically avoid that so that you stick to that idea of the core, the civilizational ethos. So this is something which BJP has to learn. The political expediency, you will win today, but it's going to have some impact down the line, because the leaders are very difficult to get rid of, especially like in, say, Karnataka. You keep importing from, it's basically the same guy traveling around all the parties, right? So you will eventually, it's a short term, you make some gains, you form a government, but it's bad for long term. Then leaders that Karyakartas follow out of respect. Here we see, like you should not have celebrities with no interest understanding of politics. This is also political expediency where we have a lot of celebrities. I know that in some cases, like say Govinda has defeated the BJP leader, a seasoned BJP leader, Ram Naik ji. But those are very transient and temporary. I don't think BJP should engage in this kind of, this is again the political expediencies. And not a political graft from other parties. Again, a very bad idea, because it's not a political leader you're getting. Remember, they are like little kingdoms that are coming in. The whole praja, their voter base, their infrastructure, everything comes into this party. And it practically displaces some of the seasoned Karyakartas who have been here for a very long time. That's going to upset them, right? Some of these things have actually happened. The reason I mentioned it is these things have actually happened. and that is a problem. In many, one of the setbacks is basically some of these grafting from other parties who actually come with their entire ecosystem, and essentially the BJP karyakartas who were there in one constituency suddenly become the second-rated person, right? Somebody who has worked for like very long time. So these political grafts need to be we need to be very careful, unless somebody is completely aligned with the ideas and vision of the party. Like for example, 𝗣𝗽𝗼𝗂𝗍𝗍 makes sense. He came in and he made dramatic change, but many of them are just opportunists. The next is build the followers, attract crowds for activities, explain party's ideas and vision. So you should see that when the leader goes out, they have to build crowds. If they can build crowds, then the party is making a progress. A good example of this is 𝗠𝗛𝗏𝗍𝗍. So 𝗠𝗛𝗏𝗍𝗍, they identified a fantastic leader. So once the leader is identified, now you see that he builds followers. Wherever he goes in so many rallies, he can attract the crowds, right? So you have to help people with the real issues. Now you build the whole cadre and base. The not divisive controversies for marketing and limelight. Some people do that, but here if you look at 𝗠𝗛𝗏𝗍𝗍, he has got large crowds that follow him. They listen to him. Now he can explain the ideas and vision. And also these karyakartas help the ground, on the ground, they help people with the real issues. When that happens, the crowd builds up. So this is typically the second exercise of forming a government. The third one is to translate those votes, translate that to votes. So if you see many people, 0 to 5%, it's very, very difficult to go above that, because people vote for winning parties. You can see that in many states, whether it's Andhra Pradesh or many other states, or Telangana, Tamil Nadu, and many other states, you will see people would not vote because they think that vote is wasted. They think somehow I know the people who really love BJP, but they say that vote is wasted he's not going to win anyway, right? So this is something which needs to be addressed, and make sure this percentage does matter. So we know how much support exists on the ground. But this is translating those, even though you have very large crowds, 𝗠𝗛𝗏𝗍𝗍 has very large crowd, and I'm sure substantial number of them actually like him and they want to support, but when they go to the booth, they again go back to their old fidelity, right? Because they don't see a winning king there yet. So this is a tough job between 0 to 5%. Once they cross the barrier, 5 to 15%, then people feel the vote is worth. And the next cycle, a lot of people will vote. And 15 to 30%, now they have established the party and ready for the governance. You will see, for example, in West Bengal, in 2006, you had 1.9%. It was tough to break the barrier. In 2011, 4.6%. This is assembly election. And then 2016, they went to 10%. They came to the second level. And what happened in 21? It went all the way to like 40%, right? 37, 38%, so 40%. So now this is a formidable force in West Bengal. And we'll go over the West Bengal later, but BJP is in comfortable place, and that is the real force, and it will eventually form the government. So there is no doubt about that. But you see how the base was built. Yeah.
Mohanji, I just wanted to clarify to our viewers that the numbers in the square brackets under West Bengal or Telangana are the number of seats in contention. And again, everywhere it is the number of seats. So don't get confused as to what that 74 in 2021 row means. That essentially means that's the number of seats they got. Mohanji is trying to make the transition translate to votes. Essentially, that is a theory. Here you are seeing the practical. Go ahead, sir.
So that's correct. Yeah, I should mention that. So in West Bengal, you see the 294 is total assembly seats that they fought, 2%, 4%. You see, they translated to votes. They got 40%. The seats kind of slowly increased, but that comes as the next step. The first step is about getting the percentages. You see this in practically every place. Obviously, in some places, you can make a bigger jump, but this is generally the transition. So between 5 years, if they do very good, way of identifying the leaders, build the followers. Like for example, say Tamil Nadu might perhaps skip a step or two, because you really have a good leader, and within few years, they can build good followers. They can translate to votes much faster. So, but this is generally the process. The election itself is like taking a sampling at one point, a sample size. But the process actually goes through this, where people are actually willing to vote. You see that in Telangana too, it was 3.8%. Now, this is 2009. This includes the combined Andhra Pradesh. But I just put this number. In 2014, it went to 10%, 20%, and now in 2024, it's 35%. So you see the gradual growth of that. This was the Lok Sabha elections, Telangana, 17 seats are being contested. Here, 294 for the assembly. There are several examples of this, but this is a general flow of how you form the government. You identify a leader, then you build followers, they attract crowds, then you have to convince the crowd to go and vote. That translates to the percentage. That percentage gives you the real support on the ground, irrespective of whether you got any seats, and that comes later. But these 3 steps have to be followed this way. The 4th step is, once you get substantial percentage, you have to convert them to the seats. That is where the poll math, the for alliance, comes in. Sometimes some people have alliances, but other ways on how you manage your poll math, as in, it's pointless to get 90% of the votes in one place and 0 in a couple of other places, right? So how you balance that out, and how you make sure you're basically uniformly you're paying attention to all your constituencies, and in some cases forming alliances, which we have seen in the last 2024 election. The opposition India Alliance has done an amazing job. Personally, I don't think it is the India Alliance that did it. It probably gave it to a third party, an outside source, some international or somebody else who actually has a big organization. They sat through and did all the analysis for them. But whatever be the case, the end result is that they knew what to do and they got the alliances right. Now, when you convert to seats, as you see over here, right? For example, you see there are, let's say the orange color there are 4 seats in the contest. This has 20 votes, let us say. Each of the place has 10 votes each, right? Give or take. So we have, so 11 votes in each of the place. Now there are 10 votes for the green party, the gray has 7, and the blue has 7 votes. You see all the 4 seats will be won by the orange, right? Because they have the majority. Now, if the rest of them form an alliance, the poll math, if they form an alliance, the orange party still gets 20, but it got 0 seats. But how does the alliance formed? Because you see we have 10 seats for the green, 10 votes for the green and 7 votes each for the gray and blue. In general, how do you divide them up? The green will decide to contest in 2 seats. The other 2 will contest in 1 seat each. So this is how the division works. An alliance is basically kind of as close as possible an even exchange of the votes. So I bring in so many votes, you bring in so many votes, and the proportion, they look at it and say that is how we're going to divide the seats. And remember the high fidelity, low attrition. And therefore, most of those, as far as the politics is concerned, they are very sharp. Any seasoned politician knows what his worth is, his votes, and they're going to do an exchange. And of course, there is an element of poker game too, where, for example, in 2024, I really don't think Congress actually was worthy of 20%. It probably went down, but they did a good negotiation and they retained the 20%. When the party, again, the alliance splits, you will see Congress will probably fall down to 15 or something, or even less. So because the alliance is formed based on the historical data, unless you have a very solid data that you have a better following. Like TDP for BJP did for TDP in Andhra Pradesh. They actually could demonstrate that we actually have a 10% following here. And once the demonstration is done, TDP is sure that if it goes by itself, it is going to lose. Because Chandrababu Naidu, he was in a hurry and he had to, and he got scared. All of that is meaningless because these are very, very, very seasoned politicians. They have been politicians for their whole life. So nobody gets terrified and scared, and none of those things happen. So he did his math too. The math was shown. They figured 10% of the votes are going to BJP, which means TDP is not forming the government. BJP is needed. They're not getting all the seats in Lok Sabha. The BJP alliance is absolutely needed, and therefore alliance was formed. And once the alliance was formed, you see even the BJP didn't have the 10% in the past. They got the 10%. But again, for Congress, basically they went with the historical data. They said my 20% is always consistent. So that is how the alliance was done there. But you understand how this alliance is formed. Now, how do you break this? Either we do the poll alliance, or the other option is break the opposition parties, which is perfectly fine, right? Because it's like little kingdoms, and those kingdoms don't yield, they break them up. And this happens everywhere. This is like a little war scenario where other kingdoms will be broken. And then you absorb the winning and aligned leaders. Every party has done this in the past. But in general, for BJP, they need to absorb other winning and aligned leaders, aligned as in who actually believe in the same ideas and vision, such as getting, say, Hemant Biswa Sarma ji is like an amazing move, because even though he was in Congress for a very, very long time, we could see that he really doesn't belong there. He actually belongs to BJP. You can find so many other people who are still sitting in Congress who don't really belong there. So these are the people, you get them. Then emphasis on weaker and marginal seats, which is again part of the poll math and alliance, right? You make sure where you're weaker and you try to jump over that hoop to make sure you get the seat. The last one is about forming the government. Why is this a separate step? If you have enough seats, you should form the government. Not necessarily. For example, in Karnataka, BJP got 104 seats, 36%. Congress got 38% and 80 seats. JDS got 37 seats with 18%, and he was the chief minister. Now, why is that? It's because you don't necessarily have to win the seats. You can deny the other person from forming the government. That's also good enough. And JDS did an amazing job at it. I think, so that's the reason there's the kingmakers. So you don't necessarily have to win in many of the constituencies. It's okay if you deny the other party, right? Which means putting up new candidates, and there are other, strategies that are being done, but at least understand the concept. That it is not everything is about how many votes and how many percentage I get. It is also making sure what the other person does not get. That is the kingmaker, and that is denying the other parties from winning. And this works for constituency and all the way to the state and national level as well. Then post-election alliance support, and when which is also part of forming the government. So this is the basic 5 steps. All right. So just review this. But anywhere you form the government, it is not like you just run to the election and you form a government. People do think through these steps. They will say, first, we need the right leaders. They need to attract the crowds. That needs to translate to the votes. These votes must convert to the seats. Each one has its own math and its own strategies. It is not one single ball game. And then forming the government. All of these 5 are distinct. There are distinct strategies for each one of these steps. Nothing is out of the thin air. It's not one single, one single package of strategy. All right. And you see this in every state. So move to the next one.